Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail for a world of adventure, treasure, and the thrilling freedom of the open sea. We're talking about the Golden Age of Piracy, a time of legendary figures like Blackbeard and Captain Kidd, of bustling port towns, and the romantic lure of a life lived outside the law. But forget the movies. Forget the tales of swashbuckling heroes and buried treasure maps. Tonight, we're looking at the grim, dirty reality of life on the high seas, a world of disease, brutality, and a constant, gnawing fear of death. This is a journey you would most definitely not survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where and when you're listening from in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a young man named Elias, a recent arrival to the bustling port of Boston in the year 1718. The air, thick with the smell of salt, fish, and rum, bites at your nose. The cobblestone streets are a chaotic river of sailors, merchants, and dock workers, each with a purpose you can't quite grasp. You're new here, a recent arrival from the farmlands of Connecticut, and the city's sheer scale is overwhelming. The gas lamps hiss to life, casting long, dancing shadows on the brick walls, and you can feel the city's heart beating beneath your worn leather boots. But it's not a healthy, rhythmic beat. It's a chaotic, feverish thrum. You've been looking for work for days, your pockets getting lighter with each passing meal, and the desperation is starting to set in like a cold, clammy hand on your back. A man, his face a web of deep-set wrinkles and his clothes stained with something you'd rather not identify, leans against a lamppost, watching you. His eyes, the color of a muddy river, meet yours, and a thin, knowing smile spreads across his face, revealing a few missing teeth. He pushes himself off the post, his movement surprisingly spry for his age. "Looking for a job, are ya, son?" he rasps, his voice like gravel. You nod, your throat too tight to speak. "I've got just the thing for a strong lad like you. Pays well, too. You just gotta have a good pair of sea legs." He gestures with a gnarled hand toward the bustling docks, a forest of masts and rigging that seems to scrape the sky. You catch a whiff of the sea, a smell so profound it makes your eyes water. It's the smell of everything the ocean touches, a concentrated miasma of salt, tar, and forgotten things. He introduces himself as Silas, and the job he's offering is one that few would dare to consider. He's a press gang leader, a man who uses force and deception to recruit sailors for the Royal Navy. While the rest of the city lives and works on land, Silas operates in the shadows, preying on the desperate and the naive. Your first instinct is to refuse, to run back to the surface world and find a more respectable, less dangerous job. But the hunger in your belly, a constant gnawing presence, is a powerful motivator. Silas sees the hesitation in your eyes and laughs, a dry, rattling sound. It's honest work, son, just a little involuntary. He promises a decent wage for your first day, enough to get a proper meal and a bed for the night. The thought of a warm bed, a luxury you haven't experienced in weeks, seals the deal. You agree. And with a grunt of satisfaction, Silas leads you to a dark alley a few blocks away, an almost invisible scar on the city's face. The alley is a narrow, dark canyon between two brick buildings, its surface slick with a layer of grime. It's a place where the sounds of the city are muffled, a place where people go to do things they don't want anyone to see. Silas lights a small lantern, its flickering flame casting long, grotesque shadows on the brick walls of the alley. The darkness before you is just wide enough for two people to stand side by side, and the floor is a squishy, unknown substance. As you walk into the alley, the sound of the city above fades away, replaced by the gurgling and sloshing of the subterranean rivers of waste. You find yourself in a world of perpetual twilight, lit only by the weak glow of your lantern. The air is thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of decay. Your feet squish with every step, and you try not to think about what exactly you're stepping in. Silas, however, seems perfectly at home, navigating the darkness with the practiced ease of a man who has spent more time down here than up above. He holds his lantern high, illuminating the slick, brick-lined walls of the alley, a marvel of human ingenuity that was meant to hide the city's shame, not to be a workplace. He points to the ground, a churning river of detritus and filth, and says, "That's our gold, right there. You just gotta look for it." He explains the process. You're not looking for money or jewels, at least not directly. You're looking for sailors. The city's taverns, he explains, are filled with sailors who have just been paid, men who are drunk, vulnerable, and easy to snatch. Your job is to help him, to be the muscle, to help him subdue the men and drag them to the waiting ship. It's a grim and dangerous job, a constant battle against the will of desperate men who would rather die than be forced into the Navy. A common joke among press gang leaders is that a good day's work is a day without a bloody nose. Historians still debate whether this was a genuine belief or just a morbid coping mechanism for the grim reality of their work. You find yourself wondering if any of the money you earn will be worth the feeling of this filth squishing between your toes. Your first mark is a young sailor, no older than you, who is staggering out of a tavern, his face flushed with rum and his pockets a jingle of coins. Silas gives you a nod, and you both move in, two silent shadows in the dark. The sailor, too drunk to notice, stumbles into you, and with a grunt of surprise, he's on the ground. Silas, with a practiced motion, holds a cloth to his nose, a grim concoction of rum and opium that quickly knocks him out. You and Silas then drag him to a waiting cart, a silent, grim procession of two. The body, a young man who was once free and happy, is now just a sack of flesh and bones, a commodity to be sold to the Navy. It's a moment of profound moral conflict, a gut punch of reality that makes the sewers and the leech-infested marshes seem almost idyllic. The money, though, the promise of a better life, is a powerful argument against your conscience. You try to tell yourself that you're just helping the Navy, that the man would have just spent all his money on rum anyway. But the words feel hollow and unconvincing. You press on, your sense of disgust slowly giving way to a strange, almost numb focus. You start to see patterns in the flow of the drunks, learning where the more valuable sailors tend to stagger. Silas teaches you how to use a long, hooked pole to sift through the deeper piles, a technique that saves you from having to plunge your hands into the thickest parts of the muck. The darkness and the confined space, which initially felt so oppressive, start to feel normal. The gurgling of the city's underbelly becomes a sort of background music, a soundtrack to your grim work. You find a few more sailors, a brass button from a military uniform, and even a small porcelain doll's head, its painted eyes staring blankly at you from the depths of the waist. It's a strangely poignant find, a relic of a child's lost toy, now just another piece of junk in the city's massive toilet. You toss it into your sack, a small gesture of respect for the unknown child who once loved it. As you continue your grim harvest, Silas shares a common historical fact about the press gangs. He tells you about how the Royal Navy, desperate for sailors to man their ships, would often resort to this grim practice, a legal form of kidnapping that was a constant source of fear for sailors and civilians alike. It's a bit of common knowledge, a fact you've heard whispered on the streets, now takes on a new, more immediate meaning as you wade through the results of that decision. He also tells you a little-known detail. Some parts of the press gang system are so old and unstable that they've been bricked up, creating forgotten labyrinths that only the most daring press gang leaders would venture into. These lost tunnels, he says, are rumored to contain the greatest fortunes, lost for decades, just waiting to be found. But they're also incredibly dangerous, prone to collapse, and filled with pockets of poisonous gas. You decide right then and there that you'll stick to the safer, if equally disgusting, paths. Hours pass, marked only by the growing weight of your sack and the increasing fatigue in your muscles. You found a surprising number of sailors, mostly young and drunk, all caked in filth but still recognizable. The silver spoon you found earlier is a bit of a fluke, a testament to the random luck of a Tosher's life. You learn that most of the work is just tedious sifting, a constant low-level grind for a few pennies here and there. But every once in a while, there's a small glimmer of hope, a flash of something shiny that makes the work worth it. Silas says the best finds are often near the wealthiest parts of town, where people are more likely to lose a fancy pocket watch or a gold ring. The thought of finding something truly valuable keeps you going, a small spark of greed in the midst of all the grime. Silas, your guide in this foul new world, tells you a story about a famous press gang leader named Old Man Higgins, who supposedly found a bag filled with gold coins and disappeared, never to be seen again. The story is a bit of a local legend, a hopeful tale passed down among the desperate, a sort of lottery ticket for the eternally unlucky. But even in the midst of the grime and the stench, you can't help but feel a flicker of that hope. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to find the next big score. You're not just a scavenger anymore. You're an adventurer in a forgotten kingdom, a modern-day treasure hunter, albeit one covered in a thick layer of, well, it's a good way to trick your mind into continuing the work, a little self-delusion to get you through the day. Your stomach rumbles again. But this time it's not just from hunger. It's a sort of protest, a visceral rejection of the environment you're in. You're now completely numb to the smell, a phenomenon Silas calls sewer blindness, where your nose just gives up trying to process the stench. You can feel the cold water seeping through your boots, a constant chilling reminder of where you are. Silas checks his pocket watch, its gleaming face a stark contrast to the filth all around you. Time to go. Sun, the tide's coming in. He points to a subtle rise in the water level, a sign that the city's plumbing is starting its evening flush. The flow is getting stronger, the gurgling turning into a low roar. You retrace your steps, your sack heavy on your shoulder, and climb back up the rusted ladder. The sight of the night sky, dotted with a few timid stars, feels like a revelation. The air, though still far from clean, feels like a fresh breeze. The smell of horse manure on the street is almost pleasant compared to the miasma you just left. You and Silas struggle to put the manhole cover back in place, and with a final, satisfying clang, you seal off the world you've just come from. You feel like a survivor, a veteran of a war fought in the dark. Silas counts the day's take and hands you a handful of coins. It's more money than you've seen in weeks. Enough for a warm meal, a few drinks, and a proper bed. The money, though it smells faintly of the sewer, feels like a weight of freedom in your hand. He claps you on the shoulder. See, I told you. Good work for a strong lad. He smiles, and this time, you feel a genuine sense of camaraderie with him. He tells you to meet him at the same spot tomorrow night if you're up for it. The thought of doing it all again is a bit daunting, but the thought of the money is even more compelling. You find a small, bustling tavern, the warmth and the chatter a welcome contrast to the cold and silence of the sewer. You order a hot stew and a frothy beer, And as you eat, you can't help but notice the people around you. They're all so clean, so oblivious to the dark, churning world beneath their feet. They laugh and talk about their day, their jobs, their lives, completely unaware that people like you and Silas exist to sift through their discarded lives. The experience has given you a new perspective, a strange sense of ownership over the city. You know its secrets, its hidden pathways, its dirty little truths. You're an essential part of its functioning, even if no one knows you exist. You're the unflushable, a scavenger in the belly of the beast. And tonight, you sleep well, dreaming of tarnished silver and forgotten gold. The cold, salt-laced air of the Boston docks is a familiar presence now, a constant reminder of your grim new life. The memory of the press gangs, a brutal ballet of force and fear, is a fresh scar on your soul. You've been a part of the city's grim, unseen machinery, a silent shadow in a world of honest labor. But your luck, a fickle mistress at best, has taken a grim turn. You're no longer a press gang leader's assistant. You're a victim. One night, as you stumble out of a tavern, your mind a foggy blur of rum and exhaustion, you feel a sudden, sharp pain on the back of your head. The world goes black, and you fall into a deep, dreamless sleep. You wake up to the cold slap of water on your face, a jarring jolt that brings you back to a grim reality. You're on a ship, a foul, reeking prison of wood and canvas. The air is thick with the smell of tar, unwashed bodies, and something else, a sour, musky scent of rot and decay. You're not a press gang leader anymore. You're a pressed man, a victim of the very system you once profited from. You're now a common sailor, a prisoner of the sea, and your new life is a grim, endless cycle of brutal labor and profound misery. The ship, you soon learn, is a merchant vessel, the Sea Serpent, a massive galleon bound for the Caribbean. The captain, a hulking brute named Captain Thorne, has a face like a storm cloud and a temper to match. The crew, a motley collection of scoundrels, drunks, and pressed men, are a grim reflection of the life you've been forced into. The work is brutal and endless. You're a part of the ship's grim, unyielding rhythm, a constant cycle of raising sails, swabbing decks, and hauling ropes. The sun, a brutal, relentless presence in the sky, beats down on your head, and the salt spray, a constant, stinging presence, bites at your skin. Your hands, once soft and unblemished, are now a mass of blisters and calluses, a grim testament to your new life. Life as a common sailor is a constant battle against the elements and against your own body. The food is a grim joke, a constant diet of hardtack, a biscuit so hard you could break your teeth on it, and salt junk, a piece of salted beef or pork so old it's more like leather than meat. The water is often foul, a slimy, brackish liquid that smells of rot and decay. The lack of fresh fruit and vegetables leads to a common historical fact of life at sea: scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C that can lead to bleeding gums, loose teeth, and, in the worst cases, death. You soon learn to fear the first signs of the disease, the subtle ache in your joints, the faint bleeding of your gums. It's a grim, constant fear, a sword of Damocles hanging over your head. The ship's surgeon, a greasy, unpleasant man named Dr. Alistair, is less a healer and more a grim reaper. His tools are a rusty collection of saws, knives, and clamps, and his methods are a grim reflection of the times. Amputations, he tells you, are his specialty, a grim and brutal act of surgery that he performs with a frightening lack of empathy. His surgical table, a blood-stained plank of wood in the ship's dark, foul-smelling sick bay, is a place of profound terror. You learn a little-known detail about life at sea. A good surgeon was a rare commodity, and most ships had to make do with men who had little to no medical training, men who learned their trade through grim experience and a steady supply of rum. You, a man who once trafficked in corpses, are now a patient of a man who sees you as little more than a piece of meat to be cut and sawed. The fear of mutiny, a constant simmering presence on a ship of pressed men, is a grim reality. The captain, a brutal tyrant, rules with an iron fist, his whip a constant presence on the deck. The crew, a desperate and angry bunch, often whisper of rebellion, of seizing the ship and becoming pirates, of living a life of freedom and fortune. But the fear of the captain's whip and the fear of a brutal, messy death is a powerful deterrent. A joke among the crew, a grim and bitter one, is that the only thing worse than life at sea is a life on land with a bounty on your head. It's a grim truth, a dark humor that you can't help but appreciate. Your life as a sailor is a grim, endless cycle of brutal labor and profound misery. You're a prisoner of the sea, a pawn in a brutal game of power and greed. You've seen the grim realities of the city, the sewers, the graveyards, the press gangs. But this is a new level of hell. The city, for all its grime and its cruelty, at least offered you a chance to escape. The sea offers you no such luxury. You're a prisoner of the ocean, a small, insignificant part of a vast, brutal machine. You are a sailor, a pressed man, and your life is a constant, grinding battle against a world that seems determined to crush your soul. But you're a survivor. You've survived the sewers, the graveyards, the press gangs. You've survived the city, and you'll survive the sea. You have to. It's the only choice you have. The darkness of the night feels different now. Not just an absence of light, but a presence of secrets. You've gotten used to the grimy parts of the city, the hidden corners where life is a constant, desperate struggle. Your body, though still tired, is getting stronger, and your pockets, though not full, are no longer empty. The coins you've earned from being a tosher and a leech collector are a testament to your grim new life. But as you walk through the dimly lit streets, you realize there's a whole other side to this world, a more sinister one. It's a side of the city that deals in life and death in the most macabre way possible. You're a regular at Silas's Corner Pub now, a place where the air is thick with smoke, cheap liquor, and hushed conversations. Tonight, Silas is talking to a man you haven't seen before, a gaunt, fidgety character with hollow eyes and hands that never seem to stop moving. His name is Jeremiah, and he's not a scavenger or a leech collector. He's a resurrectionist. The name alone sends a chill down your spine. Silas sees your confused and slightly horrified expression and explains, resurrectionists, or body snatchers, as they were more commonly known, were men who supplied corpses to the city's burgeoning medical schools. With the strict laws on legal dissection, the demand for fresh cadavers far outstripped the supply, creating a gruesome but lucrative black market. Jeremiah, it turns out, is looking for a new partner, a strong lad who isn't afraid of a little dirt and a lot of dead people. The pay, he explains in a hushed tone, is staggering. A single fresh corpse could fetch more money than you could make in a month of toshering or leech collecting. The risk, however, is equally staggering. Getting caught meant a long stay in prison or, if you were unlucky, a swift and brutal encounter with a furious mob. But the thought of a life-changing amount of money is a powerful temptation. Jeremiah, seeing the internal struggle on your face, leans in closer. Think of it as a public service, he whispers, a hint of gallows humor in his voice. We're helping the doctors learn. We're advancing science. He tells you a popular historical fact that a lack of bodies for medical study was a huge problem, leading to a desperate need that people like him were only too willing to fill. The moral ambiguity of the job is a heavy weight, but the cold reality of your empty stomach just a few weeks ago is an even heavier one. You agree to meet him at midnight in the city's largest graveyard. The graveyard is a silent, sprawling city of the dead, its tombstones like crooked teeth in the pale moonlight. The air here is cold and still, filled with the faint scent of damp earth and decaying flowers. You meet Jeremiah by the wrought iron gates, a sack of tools, shovels, a rope, a heavy canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He leads you to a fresh grave, the mound of dirt still loose and dark against the pale grass. "New meat," he says with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. The grave belongs to a young man, a factory worker who died of a sudden fever, a tragedy that has now become a source of profit. The family has left flowers, now wilting and sad in the night air, and a small wooden cross with the name and a date barely a week old. This is the part of the job that sits the heaviest in your stomach, the grim reality of robbing a family of their final peace. Jeremiah sets to work immediately, his movements practiced and efficient. He uses a special method, a little-known detail of the trade, to avoid disturbing the coffin. Instead of digging up the entire grave, which would take too long and be too noisy, he digs a hole down to the head of the coffin, then uses a metal bar to smash a hole in the lid. The sound is a sickening, muffled crunch that echoes in the silent graveyard. He then uses a grappling hook to pull the corpse out, a task that requires both strength and a grim indifference. Your job is to help him, to be the muscle, to help pull the body out of its final resting place and into the canvas bag. You can feel the cold weight of the body as you lift it, a lifeless, heavy thing, a stark contrast to the living, breathing people you see every day. The work is brutal and fast. You have to be quick to avoid the night watchman, and you have to be silent to avoid drawing attention. The whole process takes less than an hour, and soon you and Jeremiah are lugging the heavy bag out of the graveyard, a silent, grim procession of two. The body, a young man who was once someone's son, brother, or friend, is now just a sack of flesh and bones, a commodity to be sold. It's a moment of profound moral conflict, a gut punch of reality that makes the sewers and the leech-infested marshes seem almost idyllic. The money, though the promise of a better life, is a powerful argument against your conscience. You try to tell yourself that you're just helping science, that the body would have just rotted in the ground anyway, but the words feel hollow and unconvincing. Jeremiah takes you to a discreet back alley behind a medical college, a place where a man with a lantern is waiting for you. The man, a young medical student, inspects the body with a professional detachment that is both impressive and chilling. He nods in satisfaction and hands Jeremiah a thick wad of bills. Jeremiah, in turn, hands you a small but significant portion, your cut for the night's work. The money feels heavy in your hand, a weight of both wealth and guilt. Jeremiah claps you on the shoulder. Easy money, right? No leeches, no shit, just a little digging. He tries to make a joke out of it, a gallows humor that you find you can't share. The transaction is over, and you walk away. The money in your pocket, the image of the young man's face in the graveyard burned into your memory. As you walk away, your mind is a jumble of thoughts. You're a body snatcher, a grave robber. You've crossed a line that you never thought you would cross. You're now a part of the city's grim secret economy, a cog in a machine that feeds on the dead. But a part of you, a small, dark part, feels a strange sense of power. You've done something that most people would never dare to do, and you've survived. You're a survivor, a man who will do whatever it takes to make a living in this brutal, unforgiving world. You remember a quote you once heard: "Historians still debate whether the resurrectionists were a necessary evil for the advancement of medicine or simply greedy criminals exploiting the dead." You, a man who has just done the very thing they debate, now have your own grim perspective on the matter. It feels less like a debate and more like a simple choice between starving and surviving. You find yourself at a small, now greasy spoon diner, a place where the coffee is strong and the food is hot. You order a plate of eggs and bacon, and as you eat, you feel a sense of unease. You look at the people around you, the factory workers, the shopkeepers, the police officers. They all have their jobs, their lives, their routines. They all have a sense of normalcy that you have completely lost. You are a shadow, a creature of the night, a man who makes his living in the most unholy of ways. The money in your pocket feels like a burning coal, a constant reminder of the moral compromises you've made. But as you eat the warm food, you realize that the moral ambiguity is a luxury you can't afford. You have a job, you have money, and you are no longer hungry. In this city, that's all that matters. You finish your meal, pay the bill, and walk out into the still, dark streets. The city is starting to stir, the first rays of dawn painting the sky a pale gray. You walk back to your rented room, the image of the young man in the graveyard slowly fading into a blur of exhaustion. The city, which once seemed like a bright and promising place, now feels like a dark and unforgiving labyrinth. You found a way to navigate its darkest corners, but you're not sure if you've lost a piece of yourself in the process. You are a resurrectionist, a body snatcher, and you have a feeling that this is a job you will not be forgetting anytime soon. The city has a way of leaving its mark on you, and you can feel its grime and its secrets settling in your soul. The guilt of the previous night's work, a cold, heavy stone in your stomach, has faded into a dull thrum of exhaustion. You've earned a good sum, enough to buy proper clothes that don't reek of sewers or marsh water, and to rent a clean, if small, room in a boarding house. The world feels a little brighter, the food a little tastier, but you can't shake the feeling of being a ghost, a man who walks among the living but traffics in the dead. You're a part of the city's grim, invisible machinery, and you're starting to see the other cogs in the system. Today, however, the job is different. There are no sewers, no leeches, and no graveyards. Instead, you've been hired for a job so simple and bizarre, it almost feels like a joke. The ad you saw on a post in a grimy alley read, "Wanted knocker-up, strong lungs and a good arm required. Apply to Mr. Hawthorne, 14th Street. You find the address, a long, narrow alleyway behind a row of textile factories, the air thick with the smell of dye and cotton. Mr. Hawthorne, a short, stocky man with a handlebar mustache and a perpetual scowl, sizes you up with a skeptical eye. He hands you a long, bamboo pole with a small brass knob on the end. "You got a strong arm," he grunts. You nod. "Good. You're hired. Don't be late. Not ever." Your new job is to be a knocker-up, a human alarm clock. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, factories needed their workers to be on time, often at ungodly hours before dawn. Not everyone could afford a watch or a clock, so the knocker-ups were hired to go from house to house, tapping on windows with a long pole to wake the workers for their shifts. It sounds simple, almost quaint, but as you'll soon find out, the job has its own set of challenges. Mr. Hawthorne explains the route, a convoluted maze of dark, narrow streets and tenement buildings. He warns you that getting a worker up is not always a simple tap. Some people are deep sleepers, and you'll have to be persistent, even to the point of being a mild nuisance. You start your route at 4 a.m., a time when the city is at its most silent and most vulnerable. The gas lamps are dim and the streets are empty, save for a few stray cats and the occasional drunk staggering home. The cold morning air nips at your nose as you walk, your bamboo pole a strange, awkward companion. Your first stop is a second-story window of a tenement building. You lift the pole, the brass knob gleaming in the faint moonlight, and gently tap against the glass. No response. You tap again, a little louder, still nothing. You tap a third time, with more force, a sharp, insistent rapping that feels almost rude. Finally, a groan from inside, and a shadow moves behind the curtain. You wait for a moment to see the light of a candle, a sign that the worker is up. Then you move on. The work is a strange mix of monotony and urgency. You have a list of names and addresses, and a tight schedule to keep. Each tap on a window is a small moment of intrusion into someone's private world, a small act of forcing them back into the harsh reality of their working life. You learn to listen for the small sounds that tell you you've done your job, the creak of a bed, the strike of a match, the shuffle of footsteps. It's a job that requires a fine balance between being forceful enough to get the job done and quiet enough not to wake the whole neighborhood. You can't help but feel like a human mosquito, a buzzing annoyance in the night, but a necessary one. As you go from house to house, you realize there's a certain intimacy to the job. You're a part of people's routines, an unseen hand guiding them into their day. You tap on the window of a young woman who works in a textile factory, her face a pale blur in the window. You tap on the window of a family of immigrants, their voices a quiet murmur of a foreign language. Each tap is a small connection, a brief moment of shared existence in a city that often feels so big and impersonal. It's a far cry from the anonymity of the sewers or the grim silence of the graveyard. This is a job that is, at its core, about people. You remember a common historical fact about the knocker-ups. The job was a common one in industrial cities on both sides of the Atlantic, a simple solution to a complex problem. But you also learn a little-known detail from an old knocker-up you run into on the streets. A good knocker-up could tell a person's routine just by the way they reacted to the tap. A quick wake-up meant a dedicated worker. A slow, groaning wake-up meant a man who had a late night at the pub. It was a bizarre kind of psychology, a grim and silent reading of character. You, a man who has trafficked in corpses, are now learning to read the sleeping habits of the city's workforce. The hours pass and the sky begins to lighten, the pale gray of dawn giving way to the soft orange of sunrise. Your arm, which you thought was strong, is starting to ache from the repetitive motion of tapping. The bamboo pole, which felt light at first, now feels heavy and cumbersome. But you've completed your route, and you've done your job. The city is waking up, its streets filling with the very people you just roused from their sleep. You see them walking to the factories, their faces tired but determined, and you feel a strange sense of ownership, a quiet pride in the fact that you played a small but vital part in getting them there. You make your way back to Mr. Hawthorne's office, and he gives you a day's wage, a few coins that feel clean and honest in your hand. The money isn't as much as a night of grave robbing, or even a good day of toshering, but it feels different. It feels like you've earned it in a way that doesn't leave a stain on your soul. You walk away from the alley, leaving the bamboo pole behind, and you feel a sense of relief. You've done a good day's work, a strange, simple, and honest job in a city of grim secrets. You are a knocker-up, a human alarm clock, and you have a feeling this is a job you could get used to. It's a job that, for once, doesn't feel like you're fighting for your survival, but rather helping others with theirs. It's a small, fleeting moment of peace in the dark, churning heart of the city, and you cherish it. You walk back to your room, the rising sun warming your face, a small smile on your lips. The city's rhythm is a complex thing, a constant beat of life and death, of work and rest. You've been a part of its silent, nighttime world and its early morning hustle. The money you've earned from the odd jobs has made your life a little more comfortable, but it's also given you a strange new perspective. You see the city not as a series of buildings and streets, but as a living organism with a million unseen parts. You've been a tosher, a leech collector, a resurrectionist, and a knocker-up. Each job, in its own way, has shown you a different, grim facet of survival. Tonight, however, your new job takes you to the dirtiest, most disease-ridden part of the city, a sprawling slum where the houses are packed together like sardines and the streets are rivers of garbage. You're meeting a man named Finn, a grizzled old Irishman with a face like a dried apple and a thick, calloused hand. He's a rat catcher, a profession that, in the late 1800s, was considered a vital, if unsanitary, public service, with the city's tenements and back alleys teeming with rats, a constant source of disease and death. Men like Finn were hired to keep the vermin population under control. The ad you saw was simple. Wanted apprentice rat catcher, strong nerves and a quick hand, inquire at the Dirty Mug. The Dirty Mug is a tavern so grimy the name seems less of a brand and more of a mission statement. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of stale beer, sawdust, and something else, a sour, musky scent that you quickly identify as a mix of unwashed people and, well, rats. Finn is sitting in a corner, surrounded by a small collection of iron cages, their wire mesh glinting in the dim light. Inside the cages, a few of the rats twitch and squeak, their beady eyes shining with a malevolent intelligence. Finn, seeing you, gives a toothless grin and gestures to a chair. So, you want to hunt the little devils. Eh, he rasps, his voice a dry whisper. He tells you the work is hard, dangerous, and often thankless, but it pays a decent wage, a steady income in a city of feast and famine. The danger, he explains, isn't just the rats themselves, which can carry a host of diseases, but also the places you have to go to catch them. You agree. A sense of morbid curiosity and a need for steady work outweighing your revulsion. Finn hands you a pair of thick leather gloves and a long, thin stick with a metal hook on the end. This here, he says, is your best friend. A rat'll bite right through your hand if you let it. And believe me, you don't want that. He tells you the most common historical fact about rats in this era. They were the primary carriers of diseases like the bubonic plague, and a city's health was often judged by the number of rats it had. Finn's job, he says with a touch of grim pride, is to keep the plague from coming back. It's a bit of a dramatic statement, but you can see the truth in his eyes. Your first lesson begins that night. You and Finn walk through the slums, a place so poor and neglected it feels like a different city entirely. The streets are little more than muddy tracks, and the air is so thick with the smell of waste and decay, it's almost a physical presence. Finn leads you to a row of tenements, a maze of cramped, crumbling buildings. He points to a small hole in the wall, a dark opening from which a faint scratching sound emanates. There, he whispers, the breeding grounds. He explains that rats love these places, the warmth and the endless supply of garbage providing a perfect home. The trick to the job, he says, is not just catching the rats, but understanding them. You have to think like a rat to know where they'll be and what they'll do. Finn teaches you a little-known detail about the trade. The best rat catchers didn't just use traps. They used ferrets. A ferret, a small, lithe animal, could be sent into the rat holes to flush the rats out, making them an easy target for a waiting rat catcher. The ferrets, Finn explains, were highly prized, and a good one could fetch a hefty sum on the black market. He, however, is a traditionalist. He prefers to use his hands and a stick, a more hands-on, if more dangerous, approach. It's all about the quickness, he says, his eyes gleaming in the dark. You gotta be faster than they are. He sets a trap, a simple box with a baited tripwire, and you wait. The silence is broken only by the scurrying of unseen feet and the distant wail of a child. It's a tense, nervous wait. But soon, there's a muffled snap and a squeal from inside the box. Finn, with a practiced motion, grabs the box and holds it up. Inside, a large, dark rat scurries frantically, its eyes wide with terror. He reaches in, his hand moving in a blur, and grabs the rat by the tail. It's a gruesome, terrifying sight, and you have to fight the urge to turn away. He then dispatches the rat with a quick, brutal blow from a small stick. The entire process is over in a matter of seconds. See, he says, holding up the dead rat. One less carrier of the plague. You try your hand at it, and it's not as easy as Finn makes it look. The rats are surprisingly fast and cunning, and your first few attempts are clumsy and slow. But with Finn's patient, if gruff, guidance, you start to get the hang of it. You learn to listen for the tiny sounds, to anticipate their movements, to use your stick with a quick, decisive motion. You're no longer just a man with a stick. You're a hunter, a predator in a world of unseen vermin. You can't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction with each rat you catch. A small victory against the filth and disease that permeates this part of the city. Finn, seeing your progress, even offers a joke, a rare moment of levity. Why did the rat catcher get a promotion? He asks. Because he was outstanding in his field. It's a terrible joke, but in the context of the grimy, dangerous work, it feels almost charming. Hours pass, and the night becomes a blur of squeals, snaps, and the cold, unfeeling stare of the rats. Your sack of dead rats is getting heavier, a gruesome trophy of your night's work. The smell, a pungent mix of fear and decay, is starting to become a familiar, if unpleasant, scent. You're a part of the city's grim, nightly purge, a vital but unseen warrior in a war against vermin. You and Finn work in a silent rhythm, each of you a machine of grim efficiency. You are a rat catcher, a hunter of the plague, and you are starting to understand that this is a job that requires more than just a strong arm and a quick hand. It requires a certain kind of soul, a grim willingness to do a job that no one else will, a job that is essential to the health and well-being of a city that doesn't even know you exist. As dawn approaches, you and Finn head back to the dirty mug, the sack of dead rats a heavy, silent burden. The money Finn gives you is fair, a decent wage for a dangerous night's work. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that feels different from your other jobs. The sewers were grimy, the marshes were cold, the graveyards were chilling. But this feels different. This feels like you've been fighting a constant, losing battle against a creeping, insidious evil. You are a rat catcher, a warrior in a forgotten war, and you have a feeling that this is a battle that will never truly be won. The money you've earned from rat catching, like the money from grave robbing, feels tainted, but for a different reason. It's not the guilt of desecrating a grave, but the unsettling feeling of having waded through a river of disease and death. You feel a constant phantom itch on your skin, the memory of scurrying feet and beady eyes. The city's underbelly is more vast and more terrifying than you ever imagined. A grim ecosystem where every part of the chain of life and death is a potential source of income. Today's job, however, is a departure from the darkness. You've heard whispers of a different kind of scavenger, a mudlark, who works not in the sewers or the slums, but on the banks of the Thames River in London. You've made your way across the Atlantic, the sea journey a long and arduous blur, and find yourself in a city that is both familiar and alien. The air is different here, wetter and filled with the unique smell of the sea and coal smoke. The accent is different, the people's speech a soft, lilting rhythm that is hard to understand. You're a stranger in a strange land, but the work, you hope, is a familiar one. You find the docks, a bustling, chaotic place of shouting men and creaking ships. The Thames River, a broad, muddy ribbon of water, is the city's lifeblood, and its banks, exposed twice a day by the tides, are a treasure trove for those who know where to look. You're looking for a man named Arthur, an old mudlark who, according to the dock workers, is the best in the business. You find him near a small, wooden pier, a slight, wiry man, with a face as weathered as the old wood of the pier itself. He's sifting through the mud with a long, hooked pole, his eyes scanning the glistening silt with an unnerving intensity. "Looking for work? Are you, son?" he asks, his voice a low, gravelly sound. You nod, and he gives you a weary, knowing smile. He's seen your kind before desperate men, looking for a new start, willing to do anything. He explains the job. When the tide goes out, it leaves behind a rich layer of mud, a sort of historical graveyard of everything the city has lost or discarded. Your job is to sift through this mud, to look for anything of value that can be sold. It's a job that requires patience and a good eye. The mud, he explains, can contain anything from old coins and forgotten jewelry to bits of clay pipes, glass bottles, and even teeth. A common historical fact about the mudlarks is that they were often children and the elderly, people who were too weak for the heavy work of the factories or the docks, but who could still manage to spend a few hours in the mud. Arthur, however, is a professional, a man who has made a decent living from the river. You start your work as the tide recedes, the exposed mud a dark, glistening canvas. The smell is a mix of river water, decay, and something else, a faint, metallic scent of lost history. Arthur hands you a small spade and a burlap sack. Be patient, he advises. The river's not going to give up its secrets easily. You start to dig, the mud a thick, heavy substance that clings to everything. Your hands get cold and dirty, and your clothes become stained with the dark silt. It's a monotonous, back-breaking job, but the thrill of the potential find is a powerful motivator. You're not just digging in the mud, you're digging through history. Your first find is a small clay pipe stem, a relic of a forgotten smoker. It's not worth much, but Arthur says it's a good start. Every little bit adds up, he says. He shows you a little-known detail about the trade. The best finds are often in the deepest mud, where the items have been buried for decades and where the most valuable treasures are found. He tells you a story of a mudlark who found a Roman coin, a relic from a time before London was even a city. The story is a bit of a local legend, a hopeful tale that keeps the mudlarks going, a sort of lottery ticket for the eternally hopeful. You, a man who has been a grave robber and a rat catcher, can appreciate the power of a good legend. Hours pass, and the tide has fully receded, revealing a vast expanse of dark, glistening mud. You've found a few more clay pipes, a handful of old buttons, and a few bent nails. It's not a fortune, but it's a start. The work is physically demanding, a constant struggle against the mud that clings to your boots and the cold that seeps into your bones. But it's also a peaceful job, a quiet, solitary pursuit in the heart of a bustling city. You're a part of the city's unseen economy, a silent scavenger on the banks of a historical river. Arthur, in a rare moment of levity, offers a small joke. "Why did the mudlark get a divorce?" he asks. "Because he was always in hot water with his wife." It's a terrible joke, but you can't help but smile. In this grimy world, humor is a valuable currency, a way of dealing with the grim realities of your life. The two of you work in a comfortable silence, each of you a small, solitary figure on the vast, muddy expanse of the river. As the tide begins to turn, a slow, insistent rise of water that signals the end of your workday, you and Arthur pack up your findings. The money you get for your day's work is modest, but it's an honest wage, a fair price for your hard work. Arthur, seeing the exhaustion on your face, gives you a small nod of respect. You're no longer just a desperate man from New York. You're a mudlark, a scavenger of history, a man who knows the secrets of the Thames River. You found a new kind of survival in a new city, and for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of peace. The river has its own grim beauty, and you, a small, insignificant part of its daily rhythm, have found a new kind of home. The life of a mudlark, while grimy, felt almost peaceful compared to the grim horrors you'd faced in New York. There was a certain honesty to the Thames, a simplicity to sifting through the mud for forgotten treasures. But the peace doesn't last. The city of London, like New York, is a beast with 1,000 mouths, and it requires a constant flow of grim, unappealing labor to keep it running. You've heard whispers of a new job, a new level of dirt and degradation that makes the sewers and the muddy banks of the Thames seem almost clean. This job deals with waste, but not the kind you can sell. This job deals with pure. You find yourself in a squalid part of the city, a place of tanneries and leather workshops where the air is thick with a stench so profound it makes the sewers of New York smell like a field of flowers. The smell is a mix of rotting animal hides and something else, a sharp, ammoniacal odor that makes your eyes water. You're looking for a man named Mr. Finch, a tanner known for his ruthless efficiency and his demand for the most unusual of ingredients. The ad you saw was cryptic: wanted pure finder, good nose and an empty sack. Apply within. You find Mr. Finch's tannery, a dark, smoke-filled building with a courtyard full of animal hides soaking in foul-smelling vats. Mr. Finch, a burly man with a face as tough as the leather he works with, gives you a long, hard look. He holds up a piece of leather, its surface soft and pliable. "This," he says, "is a work of art, but it takes a special kind of ingredient to make it this way." He explains that the key to making good leather is the tanning process, and for certain types of high-quality leather, nothing works better than dog waste, or pure, as it was known in the trade. The enzymes in the waste were used to soften the hides and prepare them for tanning, a gruesome but essential part of the process. Your job, he says, is to be a pure finder, a collector of dog waste from the streets of London. The pay, he explains, is meager, but the demand is constant. The work is simple. You walk the streets with a bucket and a shovel, and you collect as much dog waste as you can. It's a job that requires a complete lack of shame and a very strong stomach. You agree, a sense of grim resignation settling over you. The money isn't great, but it's a steady income, a way to survive in a city that seems to have 1,000,000 ways to kill you. The thought of this being your new profession is a bitter pill to swallow, but hunger, a constant, nagging presence, is a powerful motivator. You start your new job in the quiet hours of the morning, when the streets are still mostly empty. The air is still cold, but the smell of the city is already starting to rise. You walk with your bucket and shovel, a silent, solitary figure in a world that seems completely oblivious to your grim task. You learn to spot the pure from a distance, to recognize the subtle signs of a dog's passing. It's a job that is, at its core, about observation and a grim patience. You remember a common historical fact about the pure finders. The job was often done by women and children, people who were desperate for any kind of income. The work was considered the lowest of the low, a job of last resort. But you also learn a little-known detail from an old pure finder who sees you on the street and, with a grim sense of camaraderie, gives you a nod of respect. He tells you that the best pure was considered to be from certain breeds of dogs, and that some pure finders would even follow specific dogs around, waiting for their chance. It's a strange, almost absurd detail, a testament to the strange lengths people would go to in order to make a living. Hours pass, and your bucket, a heavy metal thing, starts to fill. The smell is a constant assault on your senses, a thick, nauseating presence that you feel will never leave you. But you keep going. Your mind focused on the money you'll earn, the meal you'll buy, the warm bed you'll sleep in. The work is a strange kind of meditation, a repetitive, mindless task that allows your mind to wander. You think about the jobs you've had, the sewers, the marshes, the graveyards, the rats. You've been a part of the grim, unseen machinery of two great cities, and you're starting to feel like a part of the dirt itself. You find a small, greasy cafe, its windows steamy and its air thick with the smell of cheap coffee and fried food. You can't bring your bucket in, so you leave it outside, a silent, malodorous testament to your profession. You order a cup of tea and a small sandwich, and as you eat, you look at the people around you, their faces clean, their hands unstained. They have no idea what you do, what you've done, the grim, dirty work that keeps their world running. You are a pure finder, a collector of dog waste, and you have a feeling this is a job that will leave a stain on your soul that can never be washed away. But as you eat, you realize that the money you've earned, the meal you're eating, the feeling of a full stomach is worth it. Survival in this world is not about dignity. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes. You are a pure finder, a ghost in the city's grim ecosystem. And you're starting to understand that in this world, the dirtier the job, the more honest the wage. The stench of the pure finding job, a constant ammoniacal presence, has settled deep in your clothes, your skin, your very soul. You feel like a walking advertisement for the grim underbelly of London, a man who has made his living from the city's most repulsive discards. But as always, survival demands a new grim turn. You've heard whispers of a different kind of trade, one that is less about the living and more about the recently deceased. It's a job that takes you not to a graveyard or a sewer, but to a photographer's studio, a place where art and death collide in a macabre and unsettling dance. You're looking for a man named Mr. Abernathy, a local photographer known for his post-mortem portraits. In an era where photography was a luxury and child mortality was high, many families' only chance to get a picture of their loved one was after they had passed away. Mr. Abernathy's studio is a quiet, somber place, a world away from the noise and chaos of the streets. The air is thick with the smell of chemicals and old paper, a stark contrast to the stench of the tanneries. Mr. Abernathy, a frail, elderly man with a kind face and tired eyes, gives you a long, appraising look. He's looking for an assistant, a gurney fluffer, a grim title for a job that is both delicate and disturbing. The job, he explains, is to assist him in preparing the deceased for their final portrait. The work requires a steady hand, a gentle touch, and a complete lack of emotional attachment. You'll be helping to position the bodies, to make them look as though they are simply asleep. A grim charade to give grieving families a final, peaceful memory. The pay, he says, is surprisingly good, a testament to the sensitive and morbid nature of the work. The thought of this job, a final, intimate act with the dead, sends a chill down your spine that is far colder than the sewers or the mud of the Thames. But the need for money, a constant, nagging presence, is a powerful force. You agree. And Mr. Abernathy gives you a small, sad smile. "Welcome to the family," he says, his voice a low, somber whisper. Your first subject is a young girl, no older than 5, who passed away from a sudden fever. Her body is laid out on a gurney, her face pale and peaceful. Your job, as Mr. Abernathy explains, is to make her look alive. He shows you a little-known detail of the trade, a special wire armature, a sort of macabre puppetry that is used to prop up the bodies and make them look as though they are sitting or standing. You're to help him position the girl, to gently arrange her arms and legs, so she looks as though she is just resting. The work is gruesome and heartbreaking. You have to fight the urge to cry, to scream, to run away. But you don't. You focus on the task, your hands moving with a strange, professional detachment. The studio is a silent, somber place. The only sound, the soft click of Mr. Abernathy's camera and the gentle rustle of fabric as you position the girl. The air is heavy with a quiet sorrow, a grief that is almost palpable. You think about the sewers, the graveyards, the rats. Those jobs were about survival, a brutal, physical struggle against a harsh world. This job is different. This job is about death, about the emotional and psychological toll of a world where life is cheap and death is a constant, unwelcome visitor. You remember a common historical fact about the post-mortem photographers. They were considered to be artists, their work a form of grim portraiture that captured the final moments of a loved one's life. You, a man who has trafficked in corpses, are now an artist of a sort, a grim and silent assistant in a macabre and unsettling art form. Hours pass, and you complete your work. The girl, propped up and posed, looks as though she is sleeping, a small, peaceful smile on her face. Mr. Abernathy takes a few photographs, and then he packs up his camera. He gives you your pay, a few coins that feel heavy and cold in your hand. He doesn't say anything, but you can see the silent, shared grief in his eyes. You've both done a grim and necessary job, a final act of respect for a young life cut short. You leave the studio, the air of the streets a welcome, if grimy, relief. You walk through the bustling streets, your mind a jumble of thoughts. You've just spent the day with a corpse, not as a grave robber, but as an artist. You've helped create a final, peaceful memory for a grieving family. The work was gruesome, but it was also a strange act of kindness, a final tribute to a young life. You are a gurney fluffer, a grim artist, and you're starting to understand that in this world, even in death, there is a way to make a living. You can't help but feel a strange sense of pride, a grim satisfaction in the knowledge that you've done a job that few others would dare to do. You've seen the city's grim underbelly from 1,000 different angles, and you've survived every one of them. The city has a way of leaving its mark on you, and you can feel its darkness, its sorrow, and its grim determination settling deep in your soul. The macabre artistry of post-mortem photography, with its quiet sorrow and grim precision, left a deep and unsettling mark on you. The work, for all its darkness, felt like a strange kind of peace. but the city's grim carousel of jobs never stops turning. You've heard whispers of a new kind of work, one so bizarre and intimate it defies belief. This job doesn't involve dirt or death, but a kind of servitude that is both a great honor and a profound humiliation. This job is about royalty. You've made your way to the opulent, sprawling palace of the Queen, a world away from the grimy tenements and stinking tanneries you've come to know. The air here is different, clean and perfumed, and the streets are paved with clean cobblestones, not mud and waste. The people here are dressed in fine clothes, their faces not etched with the lines of poverty and despair, but with a kind of placid, aristocratic boredom. You're looking for a man named Lord Ashworth, a high-ranking official in the royal household, a man who, you've been told, is in need of a new groom of the stool. The name alone, a bizarre and slightly comical title, fills you with a sense of morbid curiosity. You find Lord Ashworth in a lavishly decorated antechamber, a stern, imposing man with a severe expression and a perfectly manicured mustache. He looks you up and down with an air of profound disapproval, as though you are a particularly unpleasant bug that has wandered into his parlor. He explains the job, a position that, in previous centuries, was one of the most intimate and trusted in the royal court. The groom of the stool was the person responsible for assisting the monarch with their personal hygiene, a bizarre and deeply personal form of service. The job, he explains, has evolved over the years, but the title and the spirit of the position remain the same. You will be in charge of the Queen's close stool, or portable commode, and ensuring her comfort and privacy during her most personal moments. The pay, he explains, is astronomical, a king's ransom for a job that is, at its core, deeply humiliating. The prestige of the position, the fact that you will be in close proximity to the Queen, is a kind of social currency that few could ever dream of. You agree. A mix of disbelief, revulsion, and a grim sense of greed battling for control of your mind. The thought of being a human fly swatter, a personal attendant to the Queen's most intimate moments, is a profound shock to your system. But the money, the promise of a life of ease and comfort, is a powerful lure. Lord Ashworth gives you a look of disdain and tells you to report to the royal chamber at dawn. You spend the night in a small, impeccably clean servant's room, the soft bed and clean sheets a luxurious contrast to the grime and filth you've come to know. You can't sleep, your mind a jumble of thoughts. You've been a tosher, a leech collector, a resurrectionist, a knocker-up, a rat catcher, a mudlark, a pure finder, and a gurney fluffer. Each job was, in its own way, a descent into a new kind of hell. But this job feels different. This job feels like a final, bizarre act of humiliation, a complete surrender of your dignity for the sake of money. You report to the royal chamber at dawn, a vast, ornate room filled with gilded furniture and priceless tapestries. The Queen, a small, elderly woman with a surprisingly kind face, is already awake. Lord Ashworth gives you a final, stern warning. Speak only when spoken to. Do not look at her directly, and for God's sake, be discreet. Your job is simple, if deeply strange. You're to wait in a small antechamber, the close stool, a beautifully carved wooden commode, at the ready. When the Queen needs you, a small bell will ring, and you're to go in, assist her with her needs, and then discreetly remove the stool. You remember a common historical fact about the groom of the stool. The position was often held by a member of the nobility, a high-ranking official who was considered to be one of the king's most trusted advisors. It was a position of great power and influence, a strange mix of the intimate and the political. But you also learn a little-known detail from an old palace servant, a wizened woman who gives you a knowing smile. She tells you that in the old days, the groom of the stool was often expected to taste the king's food and wine to ensure it wasn't poisoned. The job, she explains, was a position of great trust, but also great danger. You, a simple man from America, are now a part of this bizarre historical tradition, a human fly swatter to the queen. The hours pass in a slow, agonizing silence. You wait in the small antechamber, your mind a jumble of thoughts, your heart a nervous drum in your chest. You've handled corpses, waded through human waste, and been a human buffet for leeches. But this job, this bizarre, intimate act of service, feels like the most surreal and humbling experience of your life. You are a groom of the stool, a personal assistant to the queen's most private moments, a human fly swatter in a gilded cage. You can't help but feel a grim sense of irony, a bizarre humor in the fact that you, a man who has done the lowest of the low jobs, are now in the highest of the high places. It's a joke, a cosmic prank that you can't help but be a part of. And with the money you're earning, you'll be laughing all the way to the bank. The bizarre life of a groom of the stool, a strange mix of privilege and profound indignity, is a world away from everything you've ever known. The money is good, the living is easy, but the moral and psychological toll of a job that requires you to surrender your dignity is a heavy one. You've seen the highest and the lowest of the city's grim carousel of jobs, from the filthiest sewers to the most opulent royal chambers. You've been a tosher, a leech collector, a resurrectionist, a knocker-up, a rat catcher, a mudlark, a pure finder, a gurney fluffer, and a groom of the stool. Each job has left a mark on you, a grim scar on your soul, a grim education in the brutal realities of survival. But the city, you've learned, has one last grim trick up its sleeve, one final job that is a testament to the desperate lengths people will go to in order to make a living. You've left the palace behind, the clean, perfumed air and gilded halls a distant memory. You're back in the grimy, chaotic streets of London, a world that feels both familiar and alien after your brief sojourn into royalty. You're looking for a job, a final, honest day's work that will put an end to this grim journey. You've heard whispers of a job so simple and so dangerous it almost feels like a parody of your life. This job doesn't require a strong stomach or a steady hand. It requires a certain kind of innocence, a certain kind of desperate hope. This job is about being a crossing sweeper. You find yourself on a busy street corner, a chaotic intersection of horse-drawn carriages, vendors, and a constant swirling crowd of people. The street is a river of mud, horse manure, and refuse, a filthy, dangerous place where a wrong step could mean a broken leg, or worse. You're looking for a small, waif-like child, a boy no older than 10, who is a crossing sweeper. He's a small, solitary figure in the middle of the chaos, a boy with a broom and a desperate, hopeful look in his eyes. The boy, who introduces himself as Tom, explains the job. He stands at a busy intersection, and his job is to sweep a small, clean path through the mud for the well-dressed ladies and gentlemen to cross without soiling their shoes. The hope is that they will, in turn, give him a small coin for his trouble. The pay, he explains, is almost non-existent. Some days, he gets nothing. Other days, he gets a few pennies. But it's a living, a desperate, uncertain living, in a city that seems to have a million ways to crush a young boy's hope. You offer to help him, to be his partner. A decision that feels both kind and profoundly sad. You, a man who has done 1,000 grim jobs, are now a crossing sweeper, a partner to a young boy in a world that seems determined to crush his innocence. You and Tom stand on the street corner, your brooms in your hands, a grim and silent duo. The work is simple, if physically demanding. You sweep the mud, the horse manure, the garbage into a small pile, creating a clean path for the people to cross. The work is constant, a Sisyphean task of sweeping a path that is constantly being resullied by the passing carriages and the endless stream of people. You remember a common historical fact about the crossing sweepers. They were often orphans or children from the poorest families, people who had no other way of making a living. It was a job that was, at its core, a testament to the brutal realities of child poverty in the Victorian era. As you sweep, you learn a little-known detail from Tom, a grim piece of folklore from the streets. He tells you that the best crossing sweepers weren't the ones with the cleanest paths, but the ones who could make the most sympathetic face, a sad look, a pathetic cough, a limp. These were the tricks of the trade, the little acts of theater that could tug at a person's heartstrings and earn a few extra pennies. You, a man who has trafficked in corpses and assisted a queen with her toilet, are now learning the grim art of acting for pennies. Hours pass, and the sun begins to set, casting long orange shadows on the filthy street. You and Tom have earned a few coins, not enough for a decent meal, but enough to buy a loaf of bread and a small piece of cheese. Tom, with a hopeful look in his eyes, thanks you. He says that today was a good day, better than most. You, a man who has earned a fortune from the city's grim secrets, feel a profound sense of sadness. The money in your pocket feels like a burning coal, a grim reminder of the fact that your grim, dangerous jobs have earned you more than a young boy's lifetime of honest, back-breaking labor. You are a crossing sweeper, a partner to a young boy's desperate hope, and you have a feeling that this is the saddest job of all. It's a job that requires you to surrender not your dignity, but your innocence, a precious commodity that is worth more than all the gold in the Queen's palace. The city, which once seemed like a dark, unforgiving labyrinth, now feels like a place of a million tiny sorrows. You've seen the grim, desperate lives of the people who make the city run, and you've been a part of their grim, desperate struggle. You've been a scavenger, a hunter, a grave robber, a servant, and now a crossing sweeper. You've done it all, and you've survived. But you have a feeling that this last job, this last grim act of survival, is the one that will haunt you the most. You walk away from the street corner, leaving Tom to his grim, hopeful life. And you can't help but feel a profound sense of sadness. The city has taken everything from you, your innocence, your dignity, and your soul. But it's also given you a grim education, a brutal knowledge of what it takes to survive in a world that seems determined to crush your hope. The city lights, once a source of fascination, now blur into a soft, hazy glow. The sounds of the bustling streets fade into a gentle, rhythmic hum, a lullaby of distant chatter and the soft rumble of a passing carriage. You find yourself drifting, the memories of the day and the long, strange journey fading into a soft, indistinct haze. The images of the sewers, the graveyards, the rats, and the Queen's palace all blend into a single, flowing tapestry, a dreamscape of grim and unsettling beauty. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that feels less like a burden and more like a gentle, comforting weight. The world outside, with its grim jobs and its desperate hopes, is receding into the soft, comforting darkness. You are no longer a scavenger, a grave robber, a servant, or a crossing sweeper. You are just you, a small, insignificant part of the vast, silent night. The city sleeps, and you, a silent observer of its grim secrets, finally find a moment of peace. The day is done. The journey is over. And the long, strange road you've traveled has finally come to an end. Sleep now. Let the darkness take you. You've earned your rest.